and then the name changed to Project Grudge, and that ran for a few years until 1952, 51 I should say, in early 1952. It became Project Blue Book and stayed that name all the way to the end in 1969. My book doesn't cover that many years. It covers primarily the initial years, but you can see why people can conclude that there really is something strange going on, as opposed to the official government version of this subject, which is that there's nothing of interest, nothing unusual, no threat to the United States, no threat to people, and no new technology or whatever to be found in UFO sighting reports. I demonstrate that there are sighting reports that do show can't be explained in any ordinary way, and it can't be explained in any ordinary way, and by the way the phenomenon acts, you could conclude that it's controlled by intelligent beings or artificial intelligence or something. It's not just a random amorphous blob up in the sky. Usually these objects appear to be solid. And I'm reminded always of a case in the mid-1950s of a hunter. I think he was in the mountains of the Appalachian chain somewhere, and he was hunting deer or hunting something. So he had a powerful rifle with him, and he became aware of this round circular chest. This is his report from afterwards, of course. He saw this circular disc-like craft of maybe 30 feet in diameter or something coming over the tops of the trees towards him, and he sort of panicked and took a shot at it with some sort of a rifle. And he said he heard the bullet go careening off into the woods. I don't know if your listeners have ever heard the sound of a bullet careening off, but it's a very characteristic noise. So anyway, that tells me that these objects are solid, which I suspected anyway.
Where do you think they're coming from?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, that's all up for grabs. I think it's less likely that they come from another dimension, or they come from the future, or from the past, for that matter. I think it's those are less likely than the idea that they actually got here from there, wherever there might be, and they managed to figure out how to cover the big distance involved, whether they were able to travel at the speed of light or something like that. I guess you'd call me an alien, partial to the aliens, shall we say? Rather than aliens in spaceships, rather than dimension travelers or time travelers or whatever travelers you might think of.
Well, you know what? Here's the whole thing. It's really, since it's disclosure, supposedly the Nimitz, the Navy saying, that there's unidentified objects, but they're not saying where they're coming from. You have the president who created a space force. I don't know why. But what's happening is people now are just coming up with weird things. They're tying. Well, they have always been a group of people who have tied UFOs into the paranormal. I don't believe they're going from previous time. It's not a time machine. They're not coming from a different dimension or a parallel world. I actually think we're being visited, and the reason why I'm saying this is the crop circles, the cattle mutilation, human mutilation, people being abducted. I don't know if you ever heard of Terry Lovelace, but he's a former U.S. Assistant Attorney General, and his story scares me. He's been on my show several times. He's coming back on next month again to talk more about it. His story scares me big time. I think we're being visited. I don't know by who and what or how many from different, wherevers, but I don't think they're here to serve man and give us orbs and they're really friendly towards us. I don't see that.
Well, they seem to be, they do their thing more or less independent of whatever we happen to do. That's at least my impression. And that if we see them, if they become aware that they have been spotted by us, they very often will take off at high speed and disappear. But Kevin Day, the radar operator on the Princeton ship that had these sightings back in 2004, the so-called Tic Tac sighting, he was a radar operator. And he said about a week and a half or 2 weeks before the event that's been immemorialized now, the Tic Tac event, for a period of over a week, maybe 2 weeks, he had been seeing at high altitude these radar returns. You can't tell what they are. You don't know any shape or size or anything. The radar simply shows that there's something there, a reflector of radar radiation. And there'd be groups of them, up to a dozen maybe, in a group, that would, his recollection, be traveling maybe 30 to 50 miles west of the west coast of California, off the Baja Peninsula, south of San Diego, and so on. And they would be going in groups, and they're just sort of lazily going along, and a group would go heading southward, go through his radar range capability of picking them up, and he noted those things and didn't know what they were, and he said, but he didn't pay much, he didn't do anything about it, and other people had seen them on the radar, nobody did anything, so he sort of kept quiet about it all. But he says that on this last day of deployment into a training schedule, they were going to have planes traveling through the area that these objects seemed to be going. And so he asked the captain of the ship if it would be okay. Don't you think we ought to send some airplane up there and see what those things are before we start doing a training exercise with them traveling through it somehow? And so Kevin Day was told, yes, let's do that. And so they called the airplane that had David Fravor in it, the F-18 pilot. And there were two flights of two F-18s, so 4 planes that were involved with this, with these objects. Fravor was in the first one. As the planes went into the area towards these objects, Kevin Day said the objects were traveling at like 100 miles an hour, just traveling lazily at maybe 28,000 or tens of thousands of feet. He said he didn't know how airplanes, he didn't think they were normal airplanes because he didn't know how airplanes could travel at 100 miles an hour, or 100 knots, I should say, 100 knots, at such a high altitude, 30,000 feet or so. Because the air is so thin, you have to have high-speed transit of your wings in order to get enough lift to hold the airplane up. But anyway, these things are drifting along, and he said that as soon as an airplane, one of the F-18 jets, came into the vicinity of these things, they would drop downwards almost to the surface of the ocean, or maybe onto the surface of the ocean, and stay there a short time, and then go back up to the previous altitude and resume their lazy 100-knot travel southwards, as if they were sort of acknowledging that we were there, but they didn't care. We couldn't do anything to them. They weren't going to do anything to us. They just wanted to keep on doing their thing, and that was all.
Well, can I ask you a question too? Didn't you analyze one point at the speed of some of these UFOs that if they were a humanoid inside of them, unless they have some type of device to keep them from splattering inside the craft, they would be liquefied, wouldn't they, in the spacecraft that they're in?
Well, that was, yes. This was based on Kevin Day's claim that these objects would drop from traveling at 100 knots, horizontally traveling at 100 knots southward, and all of a sudden one of them, or many of them, would drop downwards 28,000 feet to the surface of the ocean. And he timed it with this radar. We now have super-duper high-speed radar capable of tracking something like that. And he could track it all the way down to near the surface of the ocean, covering 28,000 feet, from 28,000 feet down to zero in 8/10 of a second, 0.78, I think he said, 8/10 of a second. And in order to do that, you have to get up to a very high speed, of course. That means you have to use acceleration. And the least stressful flight track to travel 28,000 feet is to go for 14,000 feet, half the distance. As you're accelerating up to a top speed, when you've gone 14,000 feet, you then slam on the brakes and slow down so that when you get to the surface, you've traveled another 14,000 feet and you're at zero velocity again. Well, in order to get that acceleration or deceleration, whichever, accelerating on the way up, decelerating on the way down, you have to have upwards of 1,000, say 5,000 Gs. Now, humans can handle a few, 4, 5, 6 Gs maybe. If you were in a tank of fluid, you could probably go higher, 10, 12 Gs, something. I'm not sure on that, but in any case, yes, you would become even more runny than Jello.
Yeah,
liquefy your bones.
You wouldn't be nothing left. You'd be not even probably gel inside of the craft. So
only Plastic Man could live through something like that.
Yeah, that's
the Plastic Man comics.
Oh yeah. Hey, we need to go on break, so we're going to be back in 3 minutes. So, if you want to get a cup of tea or something, Bruce, we'll be back. We just got to do some commercials here.
Okay.
Okay. We'll be back with Bruce Maccabee. Going to be talking more about UFOs. Do they exist? How they do what they do? I mean, when you're talking 1,000 Gs, an average guy and a jet fighter can pull a couple Gs. After that, he's going to pass out. And then that's history. So we'll be back with Bruce Maccabee in just a couple.
You thirst for some significance of the both dimensional kind. You enter a realm of spirit, of sight and sound and mind. Your radio is a cosmic doorway and your psyche begins to spark. When you tune in to Gary and the Sun and Night Dreams After Dark.